Well, friends, our scripture lesson today is taken from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, and Joseph, and Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went about among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Well, I was never a parent, but I was a child. And when I was a toddler, I can tell you I was one of the laziest toddlers you will ever meet. I hated walking around anywhere. So amusement park, mall, you name it. I was generally to be found in a pose such as this. Where I was asking Dad to carry me. It's always Dad. Dad pick me up, Dad carry me. I think it kept up to the point. You ever see these pictures of people who own like a 70-pound golden retriever who still wants to be carried around? Yeah, kind of started to look like that. I just wanted to be like that. But then, of course, when you deal with toddlers, you know that there is a flip side to the toddler mentality. There is, yes, come pick me up, and there is also the I do it myself phase. All right? I don't want your help. I want to do it myself. Or I think a lot of the articles said they call it the me do it phase. Me do it. Me do it. All right? And I was pretty typical. I flipped between these 2 phases of wanting to be picked up and carried around and wanting to be left alone to do it to myself. And I think that this is something that not only impacts our lives when we're toddlers, but it's something that I see really often in our prayer lives. Because I think that in our prayer lives, we often have a tendency to be in one of 2 modes. Either we try to do things without God, and we sit there and we just move along and we try to do things ourselves and in our own power, and then we hit a dead end and we say, "Okay, God, I want you to do this for me. God, I'm stuck, I've hit an impasse, and I need you to do it. I need you to solve my problem. I need you to fix it. I need you to step in and do it for me." So we end up using God as a last resort with ourselves as a first resort. And when we divide it into those 2 realms, we end up missing what God actually intends for us because we don't see the other options, which I think is actually the point of this passage. Now, this passage begins with Jesus doing wonderful things in his hometown. So Jesus is in his hometown. So remember, he's 30. So they've seen this kid. They know this kid. He's been around for a while. They know what he's been doing. And they go, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands?" He's suddenly starting to do amazing things, which he hadn't done before. He's teaching amazing things that they hadn't seen from him before. And what they do when they see these things that he's doing and they hear the teaching that he's giving, they don't sit there and respect it. They, in fact, greet it with derision. They see what he's doing, they hear what he's teaching, and they start saying, "Look, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon?" Okay? He's just a working class guy. Now, in that time, carpenters had the kind of social status that I think is roughly similar to the social status we see tradespeople holding today, okay? Which is that he was a little more highly paid than than the average person. Often when we talk about measures of money, when we talk about the denarius, the standard Roman currency, we often say that a denarius was a standard day's wage for a working person, for a laborer. And that's true. That's what they made. And so the average laborer made 1 denarius a day. Now, in one of the ancient ruins, they uncovered actually a 2,000-year-old construction contract. Okay, kind of apropos to our own circumstance, but they uncover this 2,000-year-old construction contract, and it contained the rates of pay for all of the different people involved. And yes, the ordinary laborer, the person's, just hauling the stones and stuff like that, got roughly a denarius a day. But carpenters and masons received 50 denarius a month. So they were roughly paid at twice the rate of a standard laborer. Okay, so they made more money than the average working person. However, they didn't have an upgraded social standing. Right? So they weren't regarded as high society in any way. They were just, a highly paid, lower class person in their society. So they really didn't think that he was bringing much value. In the meantime, remember, it also said that it was in his, that this was his family, okay, that he's with. Look, it's just a regular common family. The son of Mary, brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon. And by the way, they use this as an indicator. This is one of the reasons why folks believe that by this time Joseph has passed away. They believe that this has happened because they don't mention that he's the son of Joseph. They mention that he's the son of Mary. And so because you no longer hear references to Joseph in these adult Jesus passages, that's where scholars presume that the inference is that Joseph would have passed away between then and now. But he's just from a working class family. They presume that he has no value. They presume that he can't help. And this is one of the things that we often do. We often presume that people can't help us. And this is a matter of ego, and I'm susceptible to this. It's a matter of ego where you sit there and you start to think, look, if I can't solve it, how can you? All right. It's just a really normally standard egotistical way to solve the problem. You sit there and go, look, I know my problem. I know the ins and outs of my problem. All right? And I can't solve it. Are you going to help me? How is this going to happen? And so what happens is that we have a tendency to shut out the idea that the people around us, the ordinary people around us, might actually have some wonderful insight to shed on our problem. And because they're familiar with Jesus, they don't see him as a source of solutions. Jesus says, look, prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house. That is the place where they're not going to have honor, the people who are familiar with them. They know me too well. They know me so well that they can't believe that I have something to offer, that I have something to bring to them. And this is just, the way it's going to be. They've seen him for 30 years. And they didn't see this stuff before. He's from a regular working class family. They don't believe it. By the way, I love the preacher Andy Stanley. I listen to him all the time. And he's got this standard joke about this because it mentioned Jesus' brothers, okay? And James, the brother of Jesus, becomes the head of the church in Jerusalem. And he says, look, what would it take for you to be convinced that your brother was God? Of all the people, it's one thing to believe someone else, but what would it take for you to be convinced that your brother was God? So he's like, there had to be something special going on. So they know Jesus so well that they can't believe that he has solutions for them. And we do this all the time. We tend to discount the wisdom that might already be present among us. We discount the wisdom that might be there among us, especially when it comes from people that we don't regard as having the same stature as we do. Now, I've mentioned many times, right, my career before I went to seminary, I was a software person, and I often had gigs as a consultant. And boy, I'll tell you, this tendency is how consultants make money. Because we are often brought in from the outside to tell them what they already know. We're brought in from the outside to tell them things just so that the things we tell them will have credibility because they don't trust it coming from inside. I would often get hired by a person who told me that my job was basically to just tell them what he's been trying to tell them for years, and they won't listen to him because he's from the inside. Or I would go in and it would be obvious what the solution was, and you would make a report and say, here's what the solution is, and somebody would pull you aside and they would come, they go, oh, Rich, do you know how many years I've been trying to tell them this? Do you know how many years I've been trying to say that this is what we need to do? And they don't listen to me, but they listen to you because you're coming in from the outside. Okay. When we discount the wisdom that might be present among us, we miss the opportunities to partner with people who can really help us. We miss the opportunities to glean from the wisdom of people who are right there around us. And when that happens, we really miss out on the real possibilities that exist for solving our situations. See, there's an interesting verse in here that I always thought seemed kind of contradictory, because it says he could do no deed of power there, because of their disbelief. He could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And I would read this verse and go, wait a second, that sounds like power to me. All right? He could do no deed of power except he's healing the sick. That sure sounds like power. But of course, Scripture doesn't make mistakes, and so I read this verse and go, all right, well then I guess they mean something else by deed of power. It's not my definition of deed of power, because certainly if you lay hands on a sick person and they're healed, I'm calling that deed of power. All right? So they must mean something else by deed of power. It's a clue that the real power that they're referring to is something more than just the healing. See, too often we just want a simple fix to a problem. We want the simple fix that I can provide, or then if I can't provide it, then I want the simple fix that God can provide. But what Jesus is offering goes beyond a simple fix and forces us to ask the question, is it that we need to have a situation fixed, or do we actually need to be transformed? Do we actually need something that is bigger than a simple fix to our problem? Because when I try to fix it, or when I ask Jesus to fix it, I go into that request with a very static image in my mind. I go in saying, this is what fixed looks like to me, and I either want to achieve it myself or I want to ask God to achieve it for me, when really what God may have in mind is something that goes beyond my vision for what it means to have the situation fixed. And that vision involves a transformation of some kind. But when we're just in that box of looking at situations from our own perspective, we get locked in and we don't have the breadth of perspective that it would take to appreciate the possibilities of transformation. That has to come in from outside of us. And in order to do that, we have to be connected to people outside of us. So a couple things that Jesus does in this passage are really important in that regard. First, he sends his disciples out 2 by 2. He's giving them a roadmap for what it would take to actually move forward. He sends them out 2 by 2. Because if we're going to truly grow, we need to start including others into our circle. So he doesn't send them out alone, he sends them out with a partner. Because one of the things that we can be pretty certain of is that when we do it ourselves or have someone do it for us, we don't actually maximize our growth possibility. Sure, I will grow and learn when I do something myself. And I can grow and learn from someone else. But we really grow and learn the most when we're working as a team. When we work as a team and we bounce ideas off one another, when we face problems together and we solve them together, then we actually begin to maximize the possibilities of growth within us. And then, to take this further, he tells them that when they go out 2 by 2, they are to take nothing. Take nothing. All right. Don't take money, don't take bread, because he doesn't want the disciples being self-sufficient when they go out on their journey. He doesn't want them being self-sufficient, because if they were self-sufficient, then all they would do is go into a town, deliver some healing, and leave. And yes, the people would be amazed by it, and yes, they might listen to them, but neither side would truly learn. Because by sending them out without food and without money, he's forcing them to be dependent on the people of the towns that they visit. And when they are dependent on the people of the towns that they visit, then they form relationships. They have to stay with people in their homes. And when they stay with people in their homes, they will learn about their lives, and the people that they're staying with will learn about them. They get to actually share more of a story. You can imagine the families they're staying with saying, "How did you come to meet Jesus? What was your life like before you met Jesus? What's it like now?" And then they would be dealing with the people, finding out, what are your actual problems? Like, they might heal a sick person, right? Somebody might bring a sick person, but you might find out about the other tragedies they've had in their lives. You might find out about the other difficulties that they've faced that aren't present right there. They would actually begin to learn. Jesus wanted the disciples to work with one another as a team and depend on those who they served so that they would actually form deeper relationships all the way around. That they would form relationships both with the partner that they went out with into the world, and they would form relationships with the people that they were serving. And then he says, any place that rejects the relationship, any place that will not welcome you, then you leave. Because I don't want you winning them over with what they would perceive as glorified magic tricks. Great, you laid your hands on them and they healed. He doesn't want you to win them over for that. He wants you to win them over with actual relationship that you would form with the people. Because that's the crux of what it would mean to be followers of Jesus. Not just followers of the power, not just followers of the deeds, but followers of the relationship. But too often, the messages that we get from society, which are encouraging messages, and they can sound like comforting messages, are messages that send us down the wrong path in terms of thinking of our relationship with others and our relationship with God. Like, I love motivational memes. I read them all the time, and they make me feel better. But sometimes you dig between them and go, is the message that it's sending actually a message that's helpful? All right? Like this one. It's supposed to be encouraging. Look inside yourself for the answers. You're the only one who knows what's best for you. Okay. I would actually call this toxic independence. Right. Because I'll tell you, most of my answers have not been within me. Most of my answers come from outside of me. All right? I'm grateful for all of the teachers that I've had who've given me answers. I'm grateful for all the people I've gotten to work with, okay, who've given me answers, all right? Most of my answers did not come from within me. The answers aren't within me, and I am not the only one who knows what's best for me. All right? Believe me, I am not. I mean, to me, that sounds like a 12-year-old. I know what's best for me, Mom. No, you don't, son. Okay. So I think that this is comforting because it leads you to have a confidence in yourself that you ought to have. But if you take it all the way to the extreme, it leads to a toxic independence that isn't helpful. And then there's the toxic dependence on God. And that's where you go too far in the other direction. You have this. I know I may not be able to depend on people, but I know I can always depend on God. It's like, okay, great. So just don't trust the people around you and just rely on God. Except you know how God works? At least in my life, God works through people. God works through people. I depend on God, absolutely. But you know how God sends solutions into my life? Through people. Right? God has always sent people into my life who were a blessing. God sent people into my life to bring solutions. God sent people into my life to team up with. God sent people into my life to teach me things. You know, God works through people. So we talk about the fact that, you know, we're the hands and feet of Jesus because God works through us. God works through people. You know. When I ask God to send a solution into my life, that solution generally comes with 2 arms and 2 legs. And so I think instead of having either this toxic independence or a toxic dependence on God, whether instead of being overly confident in our own ability to do things or turning everything over to God to do things for us, I liked this other quote that was on a site actually for supporting people who have family members with special needs. And they said this: instead of saying, God wouldn't give you more than you can handle, you could say, let me come over and do some laundry. Instead of just trying to encourage people to be self-sufficient, to saying, oh, don't worry, you can handle it. God wouldn't give you more than you can handle. All right? And we think we're encouraging them, but what we're encouraging them to do then is to solve it on their own. What we're encouraging them to do when we say that is we're encouraging them to silo themselves instead of simply offering to partner. See, what I love about this example, let me come over and do some laundry, is that it's partnering with them in their problem. But at the same time, you're not actually solving the direct problem, because I have a feeling the person's problem was not laundry. But you're taking some of the load off in their lives. You're taking some of the stress off in their lives, right? You're helping them solve the overall problem that they're facing about the stress of life. And you're encouraging them into an atmosphere of community. Because it's not just a binary of either you can do it or you need to let God do it, but rather it's let's do it together. Let's work on things together. Because what God intended for us is to live in partnership with one another and with God. Right? This is fundamentally the reason for congregations to exist. The fundamental purpose of a congregation is for people to come together and live together in community with one another, supporting one another, helping one another, in partnership with one another to share strengths, in partnership with one another to share troubles, and in partnership with one another to depend on God together to guide us forward. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is why we share joys and concerns in prayer. And it's not just to pray them together, but to also be a community that says, how can I help? How can I help? How can we help get through this together? How can we share our strengths? How can we share our wisdom? How can we share our troubles? How can we share the mundane things we have to do? How can we be in partnership together, depending on one another and depending on God together to get us through life? What Jesus was teaching his people was that life was supposed to be a team sport. That they needed to go out with one another. They needed to partner with the people they were serving. And together, they needed to live a life of dependence on God. A God who provides for each of us, primarily through the people God surrounds us with. The people around us are a gift. They're a gift from God. So let's not silo ourselves off from that gift, but let's appreciate it for the incredible wisdom and strength that's there, right in our midst, that we might not have noticed. Amen.